Hey everybody, this is episode 14 of Tandem Podcast. Over last summer when I was on tour with the Tilt team in the bus, we made a stop to Woodward West. I'm sure most of you know what Woodward is, but if you don't, Woodward is basically a summer camp for kids under 18, and they have all disciplines of action sports, they call it, there, and it's sort of just like a paradise if you're a scooter rider, skateboarder, BMX rider, etc. They have lots of skate parks and other things to do. So we visited it as a guest pro team, and we basically were there for almost a week, and we could just sort of do whatever we want, and we filmed a video. And while we were there, we talked a lot with a guy named Anthony Rowe, otherwise known as BFG. And at the time, I believe he was the acting scooter director, but he was only there for the summer program. And then later, when I actually did this podcast interview, I realized that he just recently accepted a full-time scooter director position at Woodward West, which is pretty exciting. It's a lot of responsibility and a lot of commitment, but we'll get to that later in the episode. But I was just really moved by the sort of culture shock of all these young scooter kids. I mean, where I'm from, there's not really a scooter scene, so I always forget how big scootering is, and just going to Woodward and seeing all these kids that were passionately into it was really interesting. So I thought talking more in depth about that with Anthony would be good. I mean, his perspective is unique because he's really connected with these kids in a way that people his age aren't really connected usually. So be sure to look at the show notes for what we discussed after you listen to the episode or as you're following along. So here he is, Anthony. Talk about growing up in Arizona, getting into scootering. Is that where you're originally from?
I've lived in Arizona since I was 5. I didn't really start getting into scootering really until about 15. And that was just through like Sean Cardwell, Alex Stedman, all those guys that lived out there at the time. I just like went to the skate park one day with the scooter and they just happened to be there.
Like did you know of them before that? Like did you see videos or anything of them?
No, I want to say I watched the Terry Price like mini video 2 or something like that. Went and bought a scooter. I remember I bought brown grip tape from this like little skate shop at the rec center, and like went to the skate park, and they just happened to be there. Like probably like the second time that I went. There's also a dude there. Anthony Bustos was there. I want to say Raymond was there too. But then there was also Charles Doige, who you might know as an Arizona local from back in the day. And that's actually where I originally got like my nickname BFG. Was they just started calling me that, and they didn't bother to like learn my name until like 3 or 4 years after that.
That's quite a list of names. I wonder, were they just all there riding, or was there an event?
They were just all there riding, but it was probably because there was an event, and I just had no clue that was going on. They were just all at Freestone.
Yeah, it's funny that you bring up that Terry Price video. Is it the one where the intro is like him getting out of his car?
Yeah, I want to say it is. 'Cause I remember the bangers, like the first double backflip to Resi.
That part gets brought up in so many of these episodes. Like that's the video that people watched that got them scootering.
Don't even remember like how I watched it on YouTube the first time. Like it just sticks in my memory that I watched it though.
Yeah, I remember him posting like clips from that video on SR before YouTube existed, and we would like download them off a server and watch them, and then that like YouTube finally existed, and then that video came out and I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, that video was like the reason I like bought a scooter and even got into scootering.
So what is the Peachy crew, and were you one of the original people in it? Like how did it start?
With Peachy Crew, I wasn't really like a part of it to start with. That was definitely more of like a Cole and like Austin Corbett, Colin Neeson. Those guys were kind of the core people, and they had all rode at like McDowell Mountain Ranch, which is like 40-minute drive from where I live. So I like knew who they were. They knew who I was, but we never really rode together until like I want to say maybe 2012 ish. And then after riding with them for like 6 months is when they started like putting me in videos and like kind of referring to me as like part of the Peachy crew. And then obviously since I moved out here, it's been interesting. I'm still like the group chat we have going on has kind of died, but just like everyone's kind of busy with their own thing. So it usually revives again around summer because that's like prime riding time.
Yeah, they're one of those crews. I mean, I guess sort of similar to like the Speak crew. I can think of off the top of my head, like just a bunch of guys in their local area that create videos that are as good or better than a lot of scooter company videos.
I definitely agree as far as like there's definitely a lot of crews out there. There's cuts like Concrete Crew started and all those guys. And I think they just have like a unique vision as far as like how they want their videos to look as opposed to like who they are sponsoring, because it's definitely more of it's a collective as far as like their vision. It's not like a bunch of different people trying to do their own thing.
So you worked at KTR, right?
Yeah, I worked at KTR on and off for like 5 or 6 years, just because Alex Steadman is kind of like the core guy that has worked there. So it's just like I cover for him when he's not there, or when they do like special camps or something.
So describe what KTR is to people who might not know what it is.
It has an indoor skate park, but it's kind of like it's essentially a daycare center, but they don't want to call it a daycare center. Parents drop their kids off as soon as like school gets out, and they come pick them up like 9 o'clock at night. So we have everything. Oh, they have everything. They have like trampolines and like a parkour spot, and they have like gymnastic stuff for the other kids, and as well as the skate park for the skaters and scooters.
Yeah, I always was so surprised whenever I was in Arizona and I'd go there when Alex was working and he'd be teaching scooter lessons, and there'd be actually a lot of kids taking scooter lessons. And I think for the most part, that's kind of unheard of in a lot of places. Like scooter lessons are not given. Like it's just there's not enough a demand for it. So why do you think that just some skate park in like a strip mall in Arizona, why is there such a demand for scooter lessons there?
Part of it is just because they had their skate lessons to start with, and then they kind of introduced the scootering. I'm not sure why there is a demand out there. I think it's just because the parents kind of want, like, they don't want, the kids aren't interested in like team sports, but the parents want them to do something where they have a positive influence that's like an older person. But honestly, otherwise, it's just kind of like, as far as like my experience with being the instructor, the parents just want them to be learning something, like working on something, whether it's scootering or whatever it is they're interested in. They're just kind of supporting their kids as far as like their interests.
Yeah, I just wonder if there'd be as much of a turnout as there is a KTR in like another state at an indoor skate park. I don't really know. It's hard to say.
Maybe in like a California where there's like a big scooter community, but I mean maybe like a Iowa or something like that, there'd probably be like zero turnout.
Yeah. Jordan Yassa would just be teaching the camp to one person or something.
Yeah, it'd be like him and his like one prodigy.
Yeah, but I maybe the gymnastics thing helps a little bit because it's like the parents are taking their kids to the gymnastics and then the skate park is in the same building, so then they see and it's like, oh, I can drop my kid off here or whatever.
Yeah, I can just also drop off, my son to do that while my daughter's doing this.
Yeah, it couldn't really be a further thing from gymnastics though.
Right, which is crazy. It's crazy to have those two things under the same roof.
Do you know much about the introduction of scootering as like a discipline at Woodward? Do you know what set that in motion?
The very first scooter team to come here was Razor, and they got to come because Woodward actually mistook them for Razor's the rollerblade company. and Razor showed up, and they were just like already here, so they just like let him in to ride. And then from there, I think there was a kind of like a year space where like nothing really happened. And then Kim Funk, of all people, was renting out camp and hosting those scooter weekends. So through the weekends, the camp saw like, oh, like this is because the first camp we did only had like 50, 60 kids, but then like second camp was like 100 kids, and then I actually got to go to the second camp as a camper, and then like third camp was another bigger one, and then by the fourth camp I actually got to start working here in 2011. But then by then it was already like over 200 kids were coming to camp. After a couple more years of doing the scooter camps, they actually grew into 2 separate scooter camps because there were so many kids coming. And then I believe it was 2000. Sean would know better because Sean experienced it firsthand. He was like the original scooter director here. But we did a test week at Woodward East. I want to say it was 2014, and that went really well. So they decided to have scooters here at West and East for the full summer starting 2015. And then I know Sean did the whole summer for that. I got to work as a counselor 1 week. And then the following summer, there was an issue where Sean and Woodward didn't have the same ideas. So they were looking for a new scooter director, and both of them mentioned my name. So then I came in 2016 with my first summer, and then I've worked 2017, and then now I actually live here full time as of March.
You live there like year round?
I'm in the middle of it's like a tester, like 6-month feel out process just to make sure like I can live out here, because it kind of is in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it works for me. I'm kind of a homebody anyways. If I'm not at the skate park, like I just go home. I'm not like out trying to party or anything like that. So, I mean, it works for my lifestyle.
You talked a little bit about the like participation numbers, but do you have a general idea of where scootering is at currently in relation to the other activities at Woodward?
Strictly, I mean, I've seen some of the numbers at the other camps, and they're pretty consistent with our numbers as far as like percentages. But right now, scootering is like the third sport as far as numbers go at West. We're actually not too far behind gymnastics and skateboarding. We actually did a action tour where we went to like a couple different states and stopped at all their skate parks and shops. Just in Southern California, all the stops we made at skate parks, seeing all the parks that they have, and like they're not even like private parks, they're public parks. You just have to pay to get in, so it's monitored and stuff like that. It's a lot safer for kids. I can see why a lot of like skateboard kids aren't coming to camp, so it seems like their sport is kind of dying off, but there's still like a ton of kids doing it. But every year we have the scooter numbers like go up by 30-40%. So scootering is definitely seems like it's slowly taking over camp as the other sports kind of are going back to like their kind of core like attitude, where it's like, the streets where it's at. Like, I don't need like an instructor to help me. I'm just out here to do my thing. Camp definitely has like the camp experience. So you do get the summer experience. That's like kind of what they're missing out on. But going to all the parks, like they have all the obstacles that we have, if not more. The only thing that we have is the foam and resi that they don't have, and the mega ramp.
How are the other sports doing? So like there's BMX, and then what else is offered?
All of our sports include skateboarding, BMX, mountain bike, rollerblading. We also have gymnastics and cheer, acrobatics, dance, and parkour. So the 3 kind of like marquee sports are skateboarding, gymnastics, and scooter right now. Probably the next closest would be cheer, and then kind of at the bottom is everything else. Like usually BMX and mountain bike have about the same numbers, but they usually don't even bring in 100 kids like total between the two. Like that's kind of like right where they're at is 100. Everything else is pretty low. So it seems like everybody else's numbers is kind of going down, and scootering is just like skyrocketing at camp.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I don't know. It seems like it's like a little bit more accessible than a BMX bike, but maybe it's easier to start off with than on a skateboard. Like the learning curve is a little bit easier when you're starting.
With the number of scooter kids we have at camp now, it's cool to see a lot of the sports see kind of the different levels of scootering, because we have like rental scooters and stuff that they can hop on, and of course, just being kids, they like to try out other kids' stuff. So they'll hop onto the scooter and they'll do like, skateboarders can pop shove it, they can tail whip, like, but then they try the bar spin, they try and like, try and drop into a big ramp and stuff, and they kind of realize like, oh, like it's not as easy as it looks, and there definitely is kind of like there's a learning curve. It just kind of it doesn't drop off until you get to a certain point. Whereas skateboarding, it's just like you have to learn everything step by step. And then even with the BMX kids, they'll hop on the scooter and they'll bust out a couple tricks. Once they kind of get past the tail up on the bar spin, like they try in 360 and they're like, this is like way harder than it is on a bike. But that's because it's what they're used to. But they kind of see like, oh, it's similar, but it is different. Like it's not just a little kid's toy.
So since Woodward is totally in the middle of a desert, what do you and other Woodward employees do for fun?
Usually, like we'll do like potlucks, so we'll like kind of have like it'll be either everybody or it'll just be a couple people. Like we had taco night not too long ago. We had our boss took us all out for pizza one night. But otherwise, it's kind of like everyone comes to camp, they do their stuff, and then as soon as we clock out, we just kind of like the action people. We just ride, like we just have a good old hanger sesh, or we'll ride the concrete bowl, and then maybe after we'll go to get a bite to eat or something like that. It's pretty laid back. We don't do a whole lot, but once off season starts in the winter, then we'll do like snowboarding trips and stuff like that.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so we do some cool trips like that, but that's more of like after summer, whereas like right now we're really in the pre-camp mode. They treat us when they can. Like they were nice enough. There's like this like Sheckler event for Cinco de Mayo that they're doing this weekend. They're nice enough to book me a hotel for 3 nights, even though the event's only one day. So they're just like, yeah, like take the van, like just take a weekend to do you, and like it's in Lake Forest, but it's pretty close to LA, so. So like, yeah, just take the weekend, like hang out with friends, like go to the beach, like do whatever you want, like just take a weekend to yourself. But I mean, other than that, I mean, I know the gymnastics people like to go line dancing. Yeah, there's not a whole lot to do out here, honestly. I've actually started to enjoy cooking more, even though I really don't have like a cooking space. I'll turn on the Food Network and see what they're making and get inspired. Or it's definitely a completely different lifestyle change from living in Arizona. But it is nice because it is in the middle of the desert, but we do have a lot of farmland right next to us. So when I go shopping, it costs the same to eat organic that it does to eat just like same processed food. So it is an interesting lifestyle change because it's like before in Arizona, like everything gets shipped in, so it's like twice as expensive. So it's like, yeah, like I want to get this, but like I can't afford to get everything organic. Now it's like, well, I'm gonna get everything organic, and it's like, well, now I don't need like all this like extra stuff, like all these sweet stuff.
So what do you cook? What are some of your favorite dishes?
Obviously, tacos and burritos, any kind of steak. Not afraid to whip that up with some kind of sauce. Something I've been making a lot recently. I make a lot of stuff with rice and beans, but I made like a beef and broccoli with rice type deal with there's some kind of like seeds and stuff, and then some like spicy corn, like some peppers. It was pretty good.
Yeah, chia seeds maybe?
Yeah, I think it was chia seeds. I'm kind of limited. I'm limited to my little like two burner stove that I brought with me. It's a lot of beans and rice and like burritos, and I make some good sandwiches. Oh, I'm about to invest in a waffle maker, so that's about to change the game.
Is there another scooter director at Woodward East?
As of right now, it's Ernie Porter and Matt Porter. They're actually also from Arizona. They actually were scootering long. They've been scootering longer than I have. They like Big White and I are the same age. Ernie's his little brother. We actually all grew up riding with like Sean. So it's been really interesting, like because they've worked here for a couple summers. They just so happened to get the offer over to East, and I mean it makes sense for them because they had jobs here that they weren't appreciated in, definitely. So it's good to see that they got to move to somewhere where they will be appreciated.
Would you ever move out there to be a director, like for a summer or full time? Have you ever been there?
Out to East, I have not been there. I'm actually planning on going at the end of this summer. But as far as like living out there, probably not, just because winters are way more harsh out there. as far as like kind of the community out there, doesn't seem quite as inviting as it does out here at West. West is much more laid back, whereas East kind of is, it's East Coast, it's a little more harsh. But it just seems like the camaraderie here is just like uncomparable to like anywhere else.
So if someone wants to attend scooter camp at Woodward, what is the sort of like elevator pitch? Like what they'll get out of it or why it's worth it?
So as far as working at camp, the biggest thing is, especially something I didn't realize going into it, my first time like working, you make a huge impact on the kids. Like there's guys that I counseled for my very first time at scooter camp that are now old enough to work, and when they send in their applications, like part of their out, they have like questions that they have to fill out, and one of the questions is like, how did you find out about this job? Recently, I read one, and it was like, you were my first counselor. Like ever since that experience, like all I've ever wanted to do is work at that camp. It is a super positive influence that you can have on them. It's your influence. You kind of do what you do. Like I remember Casey Corning was here, and his influence wasn't as positive, but that was because he's here to ride, and I totally get that. He skipped out on a job one day, and we had to pull a little prank on him, but he learned his lesson. But as far as like working as a counselor and stuff, you hang out like all night with the kids. Your job is to stay in the cabin, so you're able to like teach them your scooter knowledge, and you get to hear what their opinions are on like companies and video parts and stuff like that, and you can kind of give them your experiences and your feedback, and it can sometimes change their entire mentality towards scootering as a whole. Another thing would be as far as like being a staff member, you do get access to all the parks, which is cool, but then you do get to ride with the kids as well, so they see you ripping around, and then you roll up to them and you ask them what they're up to. Like that's gonna totally change their day. Like these kind of impacts that you make and the relationships you build here is something that like will last a lifetime. Like there's so many people, not even scootering, like BMX pros, skate pros, that I'll bump into in Southern California, and they'll be like, "Oh, hey, what's up? Like I remember you from camp." Like it's crazy to like run into Morgan Wade and him be like, "Oh, hey, what's up, dude? Like I haven't seen you in a while." And it's like, "Oh, like I remember, like he rides the Mega Ramp. He's been in X Games, like, and now he's just like a dude who knows who I am." Like, so it is cool to have those kind of experiences as well, because you have that, like the kids view you as that, like not that they put you on a pedestal, but you're kind of like their hero. You work at a place that they dream of coming, and then you also get to meet people that you grew up watching on TV.
And then what would be like the pitch to a camper? Like why would a camper want to come to Woodward? Like what do you think they get out of it?
Definitely as a camper, I think you get more out of it as a camper, because you do get to meet the guest pros that you want to meet, especially if you check on the website, you can see what pros are coming what day. So you get to meet the people that you're genuinely interested in meeting and riding with, as well as in the mornings we do instruction, so you kind of get that one-on-one time to hone your skills in, as well as get to know the other kids and kind of get to know like what makes your style unique. Also during the day, you get like the whole camp experience. We got the pool, bowling, movie night, ice cream social, all the fun stuff as far as like a summer camp would go. So it's kind of like the ultimate like mix of getting to ride whatever it is you like to ride, as well as getting to do the fun like summer camp stuff. Plus we do a competition at the end of the week, which is like super not serious. So that part alone is almost a good experience for them, especially like kind of the more like park guys that want to be in competitions, because it can be a good at first competition where you're exposed to like the loud music, crowd cheering, announcing all your tricks, which can be a big distraction if you're not used to it. It's super mellow. Everybody gets something, and we don't usually base it strictly on skill alone. It has a lot to do with the use of park, what kind of style you put into the tricks. So that alone can just be kind of a big confidence booster.
What's a day like in the on and off season for you? Because I'm sure that it's really different, like summer versus winter.
So like right now, kind of starting when I got here, the first couple things I did was like stuff to get ready for camp. So little projects like We built like a new, like it's like a street spot, so it's like a bank to a rail. We've also like redone the resi, so there's new foam under there, like a new surface on the top. We changed the some of the angles and how tall it was to kind of help with the campers learning their new tricks. A regular off season, we're working on projects like that. Like we're working on building a new dance and cheer building. We're working on converting one of our skate parks. It's a dirt park. We're gonna essentially just kind of pave over it to concrete, and it's gonna be like a concrete pump track instead of a dirt pump track. And then we also have like bigger projects that we have in the future. But that's kind of what we do as far as like, wake up, go down to camp, kind of check in with the people that are in charge of the projects, help out where we can. Sometimes you get your own project. I haven't got my own project yet, but I'd much rather be working with the team anyways. So that's just me. But once like we started getting into like the pre-camp mode, which is like, getting everything ready for the kids to be here, I've pretty much just been like waking up, sending emails, making phone calls, trying to get staff and different guest pros and teams out here, seeing what everybody's schedule was, and I actually just took on the responsibility of hiring all the OSIs as well. So I have to hire all the like their on-site instructors are basically just like lifeguards of the skate park, which is like the cushiest job you can get out here. So I took that on. It's like 25 people a week, and it's 11 weeks. So it's like, a little over 250 people that I have to hire. It's a new responsibility, and it's definitely been a learning experience. Personally, I think I've handled it pretty well. Most of the dudes are hired for summer already. Yeah, now that it's kind of dying down, I'm out of new applications for the most part. So like kind of like today, I knew I was doing this, so I just took the morning off. I'll go down to camp probably like 1 or 2 o'clock, work till like 6 or 7, just because that's kind of like the sweet spot to when everyone's like not at work or not at school anymore. That's kind of like what I've been doing, at least the past week or so. But a general idea is like, wake up and work a 9 to 5. But you do get the nice perk of you get off and you're already at the skate park. You don't have to drive anywhere. You don't have to worry about like, oh man, like, am I going to get home enough time to like make it to the skate park? Or it's just like you clock out and you like, you pick up your scooter and you just go ride. But it can get a lot where you're like, the one day we're laying brick all day. Like I'm not gonna want to ride my scooter after that. Like it's very, labor intensive sometimes.
So you mentioned the OSI, like the park lifeguards. Who are some of the other people you work with? Like, about how many people actually work at Woodward? Does it have like sort of like a corporate office somewhere?
I think within the last 2 years, I want to say it was 2 years, we got bought out by Powder Corporation. So that's actually more of like a snow and ski resort type business, but they now own Woodward. They have their corporate offices, and they kind of make like the final say on everything. We have our general manager who pitches all of our ideas to them, but her name's Amanda. She's awesome. She's been here for just over a year now, and she's super in touch with like the whole like action side of everything. Because gym has always been a priority of Woodward, just because that's kind of how Woodward started, was just through gymnastics. So that's always been a focus of like camp. But now that we've been bought out and we have this new general manager, she's been very much on top of like getting stuff for the action side. So like, these updates to these skate parks, these new little like street spots being built around camp. But it does all come down to the corporate side of everything. So it can take a long time to get something approved just because there's like so many like hands on it. It's a corporation, but everything is run, camp by camp. Like what we do isn't what East is going to do or Copper's going to do or Tahoe's going to do, but it might be a good idea where the corporation decides that they're going to implement it at every camp. Every camp is kind of its unique thing. They get to make their own decisions based on, their needs at camp. We needed a new grill because we didn't have enough space for the kids to really like stand in line at lunch. So we added a second like option, so now they can kind of split off, and now there's not going to be this giant line, kids waiting 20 minutes to get a hot dog, like, and then like we're gonna have awnings now, so the kids will be able to stand in the shade, and we're just doing little stuff that we do at our camp that they won't do at other camps, but they also do other stuff there that we wouldn't do at our camps. So
you mentioned this a little bit earlier, but What is the importance of visiting pros? Because Woodward costs a lot of money to go there for a week, and the visiting pros go there for free. Do you think Woodward makes that money lost back with the sort of promotional aspect of all these visiting pros?
Actually, recently we got approved for a budget. It's not a very big budget, but for people like more high profile people like a Tanner Fox or like a Raymond Warner, someone who's been coming to camp, we know is like very loyal to coming to camp. They were gonna start like reaching out to them so that they can, they can make some money as well as like covering like their fees to get out here and stuff because we understand that they are such a big part of camp now. Just as an example, we had Tanner Fox come and just shoot a video like off season, and we had people calling camp the next day. We had people driving up to the gate and like looking in the gate, like looking for Tanner all day. The mayor of the little town here called camp and was like, "Hi, I'd like to set up like a private session with my son and Tanner today if he's still there." Like kids go crazy over Tanner Fox. Like now that we are able to pay him to come to camp, it might be more of like a draw for him to want to come because I understand like up until this year he's been under 18, so we haven't been able to house him anywhere besides at camp, and that's kind of an issue when every kid, not even just scooter kids, every little kid that's there wants to go say hi, be in his vlog, all that fun stuff. But it'll interrupt camp if he's staying at camp because kids will sneak out and like try and like pull a prank on Tanner Fox and do goofy stuff, do little kid stuff, which for the most part is harmless, but it kind of brings an issue to his his well-being and his safety. So now that this year he's old enough and we can house him off-site, he won't have to pay for anything. We can actually get him to camp like without him having to kind of pull it out of his own pocket. It definitely will help kind of draw those kinds of like more high-profile riders. But as we get those high profile riders, if we were to get like a Claudius to commit to camp and we announced on our website that he was coming, I personally feel like that week would be sold out in, a matter of days. Because so many kids wanna have that experience of just hanging out with Claudius. So when you get to do that in kind of an enclosed environment where it's just you guys getting to hang out with him, like it's much more of a personal experience. So it's easier for especially the parents to kind of see like, yeah, my money is being like well spent because not only is my kid getting to do this awesome action sports camp, he gets to hang out with like his favorite, YouTuber of all time.
You mentioned that the camp would be sold out. So what is sold out? Like how many spots is that?
We can house up to 360 campers here at West. Once we get to that point, we do a waiting list because we can technically house a couple more than that, but with like kids wanting to change their cabins so they can stay with their friends, or all of a sudden now we have a son, or a sister or a brother that all of a sudden wants to sign up. Like there is like just that couple spots we leave open just in case that kind of scenario happens. Once we kind of know that that week is maxed out at 360, we'll do a waiting list to see if there's like any kind of cancellations. And if there is no cancellations, we'll honor that week. Whatever you paid for that week, we can transfer you to any other week that you want to go. But once we reach that like maximum capacity of 360, like we just physically cannot take on any more campers.
What role do you think an instructor plays in a rider's development? Like, do you think they're just sort of facilitating what the rider is into, or do you think they should be like suggesting stuff? Like, what have you done in the past?
Personally, in my experience as an instructor, I have based it on kind of what level I'm teaching. So if I'm teaching more of a beginner level, then it's more of like, all right, like this is how you do a tail whip, like this is how you do a 360. And as you get to more kind of the intermediate riders, you still have to teach them, the fundamentals like of how to form a bri flip and those kind of tricks, as well as like, you got to give them tips on, grinding a ledge or a rail. You're like, yeah, your wheel isn't straight, or oh, you're not leaning forward far enough and stuff like that. But once you kind of get to the more advanced riders that have all their tricks down, then you're kind of getting into the more of like the creative part of it, where it's like, oh, like maybe instead of only turning like a turn down, like instead of only going to here, like see how far you can like really crank that thing around, like, or an invert like Raymond. Like no one can do an invert like Raymond because he's done them for so long, and no one taught him how to do that. He just figured it out on his own. So more with the advanced riders, that's what I tell the instructors to do, is encourage the kids to do tricks that, like, that's their trick. Like there's not as many people as you would think that kind of like have their trick. But like when Raymond does an invert, like if you black him out and it's just a silhouette, like you know who that rider is. Like with the beginner kids, like teach them park etiquette, teach them the basics. You know, you have to be a lot more hands-on with the younger kids, but you're not teaching that, they're not developing quite as fast as kind of that intermediate group. It seems like the intermediate group picks up on stuff pretty quick. So you have to be on top of kind of like how they're doing the trick. Like a bri flip, you don't want your arms straight like Super Brian the first time you're trying to do a bri flip. So you got to teach them kind of, you know, how to do it, and then once they learn how to do it, then you can teach them like the more, I call it fun stuff, because you know it's just more fun to do what you love to do as opposed to like, I'm not doing the, like I can't land this trick. And it's like, oh, you got to do it this way, and it's like, yeah, I don't I don't want to try it anymore. Like, and that's just kind of a personal experience myself. Like, you know, you get to a point on a trick, you're like, all right, I'm over it. If you get to do the stuff you like, it's a lot. You can encourage yourself a lot easier to like push yourself to try it more. Or if it's kind of a new skill, it's kind of like, not feeling it. Like, not, doesn't seem like it's something I want to do. So with the beginner kids, it's a lot more of like, it's not fun, but if you want to bring it to the next level, you got to learn this trick. We help them through that process, but once you get to a point, it's like, all right, like you only want to ride, rails and stuff. Like, all right, like let's work on that instead of, no point in teaching you a backflip if you're gonna, if you want to do front board down El Toro, like. So you gotta, you get them to a certain point of teaching them the basics, and then you're like, all right, like what are you interested in? Like, what do you want to learn? And with the intermediate groups, it gets tricky. We're at a point now where we kind of have to divide them as far as street and park, because it turns into like, well, we're at this park, I don't want to ride this because of this. Like, so we're getting to a point where we have to kind of divide, which is unfortunate. But otherwise, it's like, we get phone calls from mom and dad about how their instructor is teaching them how to board slide, not how to do a backflip. Like, it's like, they're teaching them tricks. It's just like, I understand it's a trick, your kid doesn't want to learn.
So what skill levels, like the range of skill levels, do you usually see coming into camp? What is the most dominant?
Okay. So the most dominant would definitely be 12-year-olds learning how to bri flip. Sounds very stereotypical, but that is basically our demographic. We get kids ages from 7 to 17. Obviously the number one being pretty much 12 to 13. We'll see, 7-year-old, he's cruising, he rides around the park, but really doesn't ride on any ramps or can't jump or anything like that. We'll get a handful of kids like that, as well as like, we've had kids that come here and I'm like, all right, like you could instruct the advanced group, no problem. You're just 14. So you get like the child prodigies, as well as the kids that literally just picked up a scooter like 2 weeks ago. Like when you guys did a tilt week, like obviously more kids are going to sign up that ride tilt parts, so not a lot of kids that ride, I shouldn't say not a lot, but a majority of kids that ride tilt parts are going to be riding in the streets. They're going to be riding ledges and rails and stuff like that. Or we bring like Mad Gear or like Envy and Fasten, like more kids that are coming with those parts. They're doing more of like the park tricks.
So do you feel a responsibility to direct the new generation in a certain way? Like, is it pretty apparent the impact you're having on these kids?
It seems like definitely in California there is a big impact. When I go to ride other skate parks, like every skate park you go to, you see a scooter kid with a Woodward sticker on his helmet. Like, it's impossible to avoid at this point that kids especially in California, are coming to Camp Woodward West. I wouldn't consider it like my responsibility to kind of teach the new generation, but I do try and make it a point to like kind of like teaching inclusion, and like it doesn't matter like what you're riding, like you're here at the park, so we're kind of all doing the same thing. Especially with the younger kids, it's more of kind of like an etiquette type deal, where it's like, yeah, you gotta wait your turn. Like, you can't hang your scooter off the edge because you don't like you don't like it when the skaters do it, so why do you get to do it kind of deal. Like, I wouldn't consider it my responsibility, but do take it upon myself to kind of reach out and make sure that the kids understand, like, this is like a good idea. You should let other people take turns in the park. Like, it will get to a point where it basically is a rotation. Like, you'll know who you're after a certain point. Like, you just gotta kind of let it ride out, as opposed to just like going and going and going, and like, oh, your homie went, so you get to go. Like, it's definitely something I try and implement and try and get my staff to also be a positive influence on that kind of stuff. I make it a point to tell them not to get into arguments with like the other staff and stuff like that. We have had instances where there has been disagreements between instructors of different sports, and we've been fortunate enough where, they both decide to be the bigger people and like, walk away and come back and apologize, which I think can be a good example to the kids. But at the same time, it is a bad example because, they got in the argument in the first place. It's good to show the kids that, like, yeah, like, we do make mistakes. We get upset about some silly stuff sometimes. So it's just, it's better to just kind of like, hey, like, I respect what you do. Like, I'm just going to go do my own thing. Like, as opposed to sitting there arguing about who is, who deserves to be there, who has the right to, and just kind of teaching them, like, there's no point in getting in the altercation. All it's going to do is make not only like one person look bad, but more than likely everybody's going to look bad that's in that situation. Especially the kids, they are what all the people see at the skate park. So they are like the kind of like the face of scootering in a non-public way. Like, when the public sees scootering, they'll see like Ryan Williams, or they'll see like Mad Gear ads or something like that. Whereas the skaters who go to the skate park every day see 12-year-old kids. So those are definitely the kids that, make the biggest impact on the other action sports.
Can you think of one of the most like major improvements you saw in a rider going to camp over the years? Is that like pretty common that these kids are just like sending themselves and really advancing in a quick period of time?
I'm yet to really see anybody get a lot of like recognition from, their skill and everything. One that like immediately jumps to my mind is actually a kid I had in my cabin my first like full week of counseling during the summer. His name is Max Androsco. He currently rides for Scooter Farm and like a handful of other companies. And it was Peachy week, so it was like Cole and Colin and Alex Stedman and I and Jaron Ford. And we were eating lunch one day, and it was like right when the Mad Max movie came out, and so we started calling him Mad Max just because his name is Max. So he kind of got upset at first. Being his counselor, I had to go talk to him and was like, hey, like, we're not trying to bully you, like, we're not trying to call you names, like, we're calling you Mad Max because like you're like part of the group now, like you're like, we want to be your friend. We're not calling you that to like, because we don't like you. So once he kind of got over that and he really opened up, he started to really listen to like instruction and stuff like that. And he was able to like, hone his skills while he was here. Then when he was gone, he rode at like the Scooter Zone skate park a lot with Raymond. And then when he came back, his skill level had risen. And when he was here, it like got even better and better. And through the competitions that we do at camp, he now competes at a very high level because he got that exposure to like a camp competition, which is very laid back, and like if a kid falls on his first trick, we'll like let him restart sometimes. Like, we don't want there to be any pressure. So now that he does these big competitions, he has like a very interesting confidence about him, because we hyped him up so much that first week, where like he finished his run, he like threw his scooter over he's like at the time he's like a 10-year-old kid, so he's just like a stick. So he's like holding the scooter above his head, like screaming at the top of his lungs. He like throws the scooter across the skate park and just screaming like. And since then he does that like with all of his competition runs, and it's very, very unique. And he picked it up at camp because we were just like egging him on so hard one time, and he just went overboard. And since then he's hung on to that energy level and everything, and I think that has helped boost him a lot in his like scootering career. I haven't seen him like get sponsored yet or anything. We had a kid last year that came. His name is Sam, midweek he's already doing like rye buttercups and like whip front scoot to some other crazy trick. Like, and I was like, wow, like I didn't know you were this good. He's like, yeah, I've been riding for like 2 years, and like when I came here I couldn't backflip, but now I can do all these backflip variations. I'm like, wow, like it's just being around your friends at the camp where you're like you're here for the week, so the mindset is already to like push yourself extremely hard. And then when you have your friends here as well, like it just kind of brings it to the whole next level, especially with the availability of the foam pit and the resi. Like kids go hard on the foam and resi. Like I would say 75% of the kids that come they'll all do backflips by the end of the week, just because they have all their friends pushing them as well as the access to the facilities.
I don't know what the policy is, but what about when a kid is obviously like going for something and they don't have the skill level for it? Like, is it your job to step in and be like, hey, maybe you should, practice that? Like, what if a kid wants to jump the mega ramp and he just doesn't have the skill level for it?
At camp, our OSIs, that's like their job is to kind of keep an eye out for that. And obviously, me as a director, other directors see that. Our job is to step in and be like, hey, like, have you done this on this ramp? Or like, hey, have you tried it over here? Or like, maybe you should try it on something smaller first. Like, we try and do it, obviously in a kind way. But it definitely is our job to kind of be like the shot caller and be like, like that one's a little too much. Like, there's definitely times when we kind of let the kids go. Like, it's like, like he probably could make it. Like, he has the skill. Like, he just has to do it. But there is those instances where it's like that kid cannot drop in on the vert ramp. Like, we need to get him down from there. There is those kinds of instances, and it's our job to like, hey, like, get down, like, come down. You're not, like, you can't be doing that. Like, it gets a little tricky because it is kind of like a discretionary call. We tell, especially with the OSIs who don't know the kids as well as like a director would, we tell them, if you're not even sure, like, just tell them no. Or tell them to go get the director and we'll come back and we'll tell you it's okay. Like, it's much better to be, safe than sorry. So we definitely encourage that with the kids. And as far as the mega ramp is always a tricky one because every little kid wants to jump the mega ramp. And they go to East and they jump the mini mega and they think that they got it. But the mega ramp is a whole nother beast. The smallest jump is 50 feet. And when you're jumping the 50-foot gap, if you don't land, it's like jumping out of a car. It's going like 50 miles an hour. The kids don't quite understand like the impact that you have when you come flying in that fast from that high up. Like, we encourage them to wait until they're staff members, because once you're staff, you have your 18 and over reliability waiver you sign. So if you fall, it's all on you now. But with the camper, we usually, I'll put them through some stuff where, like, I'll take them to the vert ramp. Like, all right, you got to air the vert ramp, like back to back as high as you can. See how comfortable they are on their scooter and stuff. And I think we've let one scooter kid come and jump it that was under 18, that like wasn't like a big name like sponsored rider. I want to say I wasn't here, so I'm not 100% sure if he like pulled it or not. But I know he definitely did go down, and once he went down, he was over it. I don't think they realize like how hard you fall when you fall on that ramp. Like, you watch Andrew Broussard's mega case and he goes and goes and goes, and you're like, oh, like, you can go a bunch of times. But no, it's because Andrew is like mental, and he definitely suffered the consequences after. That's like a man ramp. Like, you're not jumping that unless you're really down, like down to die. Like,
it's interesting, like the way it's set up too. I mean, it's designed so you can get over it. So it's not like, I mean, obviously I haven't jumped it, but I've seen people jump it, and like, you don't have to like jump hard, you know what I mean? Because you have so much speed, but it's like you just have to let it happen. But if you bail off it, it's like so serious.
oh yeah. There's much bigger room for error. But like you were saying, yes, it's completely designed for you to make it. Like, even when Raymond comes and does it, like, because he's kind of a little bit bigger scooter rider, he actually has to drag his foot for like a very, very short amount of time. Otherwise, he'll overshoot the gap. So the roll in is definitely the right size for the gap. But yeah, if you're off by the slightest little bit, it's not like a regular box jump. You can come in a little sideways. Like, you come in a little sideways on this, you're gonna get pitched to flat. Like,
I think the quarter is even gnarlier than the gap itself. It's like just because you cleared it, you got to figure out what you're doing after it.
The quarter is definitely very daunting because it's 27 and a half feet tall with 2.5 feet of vert, which for the size of the ramp, it's not very much vert, but it's like a roller coaster when you go up because it just you like feel yourself going up and you look up and you can't even like see the top of the ramp still. It's just like the ramp just goes on and on and on, and by the time you make it to the top and you go off, you're 3 stories in the air. Like so you look back and it's like super intimidating. I forget the exact math on it, but I think it's like for every 6 inches you come like off of the coping, like as far as out of the ramp, 6 inches out means you're falling 6 feet. So if you pop out a foot, you're gonna fall 12 feet like back into the ramp. Maybe because I know that information, it makes it like 100 times scarier. But yeah, the quarter pipe itself is super insane.
Yeah, it was so crazy last summer when Ian Hernkjar he backlipped the quarter with no helmet and no shirt.
Oh yeah, with like hardly any notice too. He like tried it what twice maybe, and then got it the
Yeah.
third time. So I was hardly even paying attention. I was like trying to do all this other stuff, and I turn around and he's full send, no shirt, no helmet. I'm just like okay, but it's one of those things. It's like he's 18, like he's the shot caller, like he gets to do what he wants to do. He was fortunate enough to be able to roll away and get the video, but if he falls, he has to pay the price.
Yeah, definitely. So how often do you ride your scooter? Do the parks get kind of boring?
5 times a week, usually weekdays, and the weekends I'll either like one day I'll usually be dedicated to cleaning, and then the other days usually just like chill out, not do anything. So usually 4 to 5 days for sure. But the parks can get a little boring because it's the same thing every day. It's such a big facility. You can find something you want to ride. Like there's always like oh I'm tired of this. Like well I could just go ride this then. Like there's so many variations of quarter pipes and Euro gaps and rails and ledges and stuff. It's cool because I get to be more creative because I have so much time here. Whereas like when you're here for maybe a week or even a full summer, like you're packing everything into just that one little time frame. So you're more concerned about getting the full experience as opposed to like really looking for those like unique lines and stuff like that.
So usually someone your age isn't really involved with the younger scene of scooter riders like you are, but because you have your job, you interact with them all the time. What like trends or like mentalities have you noticed with the younger generation of scooter riders?
One big thing that I've noticed is everything is based off of social media. Like everything, I remember like back in the day we had SR. It was like a scooter social media, but it was like a spot where it was like you talked about videos, you talked about scooters, and like that was pretty much it. That's all you talked about on SR. Whereas now it's like you have all these other influences like on Instagram or Facebook, so they see all their scooter stuff and they get other influences from other places, which is a positive thing. But it can also be a thing where they get so distracted with stuff that really isn't important. Like scootering necessarily isn't important, but all of a sudden they get distracted by all these bad choices, let's say. So it's interesting to see how exposed they are to like the negative stuff in the world so early, so that I see them doing stuff and I'm like especially like the Sorens and the Juuls and stuff. Like those are so big right now. And I remember being in high school and like that it wasn't even a thing then. Like kids smoked cigarettes, but that was like a whole nother thing. It was like what like you smoke cigarettes, like but that's kind of also like how I was raised too. But it's crazy to see how like okay these kids are with just like trying whatever. Like they are like it's cool to see that they have no fear because they are young because they're doing all these crazy scooter tricks. But then kind of to hear what they're doing after they leave the park is kind of like discerning because it's like I'm glad that you guys are out there kind of doing you like experiencing life and making your own choices, but like some of the choices you're making, it's not like this isn't the time where you should be making those choices. That's kind of like the skate park environment though at the same time because it's a public park, anybody can go there. So it turns into like, they're exposed to the older kids that do it too. Whereas like when we started riding, it was like we were the older kids. Like we kind of made our own decisions based on just kind of our life experiences. But now that there are enough older riders, where the younger riders are coming in and like looking up to the older riders, and they see what they're doing, and they're definitely more impacted by like, I would say they're more impacted by the YouTube stuff. Whereas like it turns into a lot of negative towards individuals, and it's usually just like word of mouth, not even knowing a lot of the details. Whereas like back in the day, you had SR, so it was like you had the direct person talking about it, and then the other person that was involved like directly there talking about it. Where now it's like he said, she said, so it turns into a lot of like hate in the community. Where before it was like it was a clear hate towards one person because of one particular thing they did. Where now it's like, well, I heard you did this thing, so it's like now I don't associate with you at all.
With all that about the younger generation, how do you feel about scootering being carried on by them? Do you feel good about it, or are you sort of concerned?
There's definitely things that I am concerned about, but I think overall there is a lot more, good influence than there is bad. The biggest concern would be as far as like what I don't quite get what the kids like want to do with scootering. Like I remember growing up, like we wanted scootering to be in the X Games. We wanted to have like our own big competitions and street jams and stuff like that. And now those are all established, and I don't know like what these kids. Obviously, they're interested in the competitions, but are they interested in like pushing the sport further, or are they just going to be like, yep, this is what scootering is? They can take it to another level because it is growing so fast and the numbers are getting so big that if they keep with it and the trend continues, then they'll be able to like, bring it to a much bigger scale, kind of like the Do Tour. Do Tour is dying out. Like X Games is a shadow of what it used to be. Nitro Games seems like they're having a big miscommunication right now. So even kind of action sports as a whole is at a point where they're like, yeah, we do this stuff, but what else can we do? And I don't think like scootering, like I don't think as the older guys move on to different positions in their scootering career, the younger generation is just going to be like cool with like Instagram videos and like what they post on their social media. Whereas like we used to make, YouTube edits and full length videos, like you could only buy the DVD to watch. Like I don't think that will be a continuing trend as much as it was previously. There won't be that real documentation of scootering. It'll just kind of be like, yeah, I did these chillers at the park, and then like obviously you're trying pretty hard, like they're not like chillers, like because that turned into like a joke with Peachy for a while. It was like chillers only, like no bangers, like we don't do bangers, we only do chillers, like because that was a trend for a while. It was like, yeah, I don't try hard, but it's like super obvious you're trying hard. Like,
Yeah, that's funny.
if I could add one thing, just kind of like, I don't, I'm sure that's a much older generation that listens to the podcast. If anyone's ever interested in like not only being a staff member, but just kind of being part of camp as like as a guest pro, or even now that I'm living here, like I can have some guests come and like do videos and stuff like that. So if anyone's ever interested in doing anything with Woodward, feel free to reach out to the front office and they can get all your information. I can get a hold of you.
Yeah, I'm sure people have definitely been interested in that and just don't really know how to do it.
Yeah, and that was something I struggled with before I really got like into camp. I was just lucky enough that like I knew Alex Stedman of all people. Like Alex Stedman was like posted on Facebook and was like, "Hey, who wants to work at Woodward?" And like I got in touch with a guy that worked here, and he's like, "Yeah, can you be here tomorrow at 6 p.m.?" I was like, "Oh yeah, no problem. It's only an 8-hour drive. I can get there by 6." Like, so I guess yeah, that would be like, just something I want to reach out to people for, because I know when I like wanted to do something at Woodward, be involved at it with anything, I wasn't able to until I got that like in. So I just kind of wanted to reach out to anybody that was interested at all with anything involving Woodward.
But thanks a lot for doing this.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me. I'm glad it worked out.
All right, well, I will talk to you later.
All right, yep. Always good talking to you, Dylan.
See you, man.
Yep, take it easy.
All right, that was it for episode 14. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm trying to think of more people sort of like Anthony that are in these unique industries of scootering, not necessarily like full professional scooter riders, but people with a unique perspective that I could bring to this podcast. So hopefully in the next episode and more episodes to come, there will be unique perspectives such as his. As always, thanks to Ben Bursell for the music on this episode. For any questions or suggestions, email thetandempod@gmail.com. If you haven't already, subscribe to this podcast in the iTunes store, and you'll get a notification every time that a new podcast is up. And then also, if you're on Android, I've been thinking lately, I believe the Android podcast app is Stitcher, I believe. So if you think there's a need for that, if you're on Android and you're just listening to this podcast all the time on the SoundCloud app and you prefer to listen to it on Stitcher, I could look into that and get the episodes up on that. So leave a comment on whatever platform you're listening to and let me know if you think that'd be beneficial. So thanks for all the support, and I will see you on the last Friday of next month for episode 15.